Looking for something to read? Well, these are the books that I've written. Hop on down to the description to find the Amazon links for all 4 of them, and keep your eyes open for more in the future. With that said, on to the video. Hello ladies and gentlemen, I'm the Omni viewer, and this is not the promised MonsterVerse deep dive I said I would do in a recent post. That's coming later, it's going to be a scripted video, but I wanted to talk about this now because I'm seeing a particular talking point regarding the MonsterVerse pop up that I've seen pop up before, and I'm honestly kind of surprised it's still even a thing that people are discussing. With the recent reveal of the teaser for Godzilla x Kong: The New Empire, and the reveal of what most of us are certain is the new antagonist, and I say most of us because I've seen 1 or 2 people floating around who don't think that's actually the villain. I mean, all the imagery within pretty much suggests that he is, but whatever. I guess as long as there's even a 1% chance that it's not the villain, some will take it as an absolute certainty. But anyway, as people are looking at this and saying that this is the new villain, they're once again saying that it feels weird that King Ghidorah was introduced so early, and then after that, the major opponents for Godzilla have been a couple of apes, Kong and whoever this new Titan winds up being. Why introduce King Ghidorah so early? And like I said, I have heard that particular talking point pop up before. Though, in a post-Godzilla vs. Kong world, I'm honestly surprised that it is still a talking point. Because I would think Godzilla vs. Kong would have addressed the issue pretty plainly. But, just for the sake of argument, I'm going to say my piece here, and why I think that the idea of Ghidorah being introduced too early isn't necessarily correct. In order to fully understand this argument, we first need to understand where it even came from. You see, way back in 2013, when the first Godzilla movie in what would become the MonsterVerse was announced, it was a standalone thing. We only knew we were getting that one movie, which we now call Godzilla 2014. There were no sequels, at least nothing solid. We assumed there would be one if it did well, but nothing had been announced. There was no MonsterVerse, there was no crossover with Kong. There was just this one movie, and a potential plan that we suspected was there should it succeed. It did succeed, and the announcement for Godzilla 2 was made basically on opening weekend, because opening weekend did that well. They figured, yeah, this movie's gonna make back its money and then some, we can safely announce a sequel. Later on, at the next expo where they went into a little more detail, Legendary announced that Godzilla 2 would also feature Rodan, Mothra, and King Ghidorah, making it the first American movie to feature those 3. Heck, the first American adaptation of Godzilla, in terms of films anyway, that featured a monster other than Godzilla from Toho. And when this announcement was made, fans loved it. Fans were freaking out. Finally, we're gonna get to see Rodan, Mothra, and Ghidorah through this particular lens. And we were especially excited because we had seen not only what Godzilla 2014 did with the monsters, but what Pacific Rim had done before that. Arguably, Pacific Rim set the bar, and Godzilla continued bringing it forward. So we were really excited to see the monsters through that particular lens. And nobody objected to the idea of King Ghidorah being in the movie. In fact, we all pretty much suspected he would be anyway, if they were going to bring in another Toho monster, because King Ghidorah is one of Toho's big 5. In descending order, the big 5 basically are Godzilla, Mothra, King Ghidorah, Mechagodzilla, and Rodan. Sometimes replaced by Baragon, which is how Baragon was able to make the cut for GMK, but that's a whole other matter. Those are the big 5, of course, so we knew Ghidorah was going to be in it. That's the main point. And then, following that, it was announced that Kong Skull Island, which was originally being developed by Legendary at Universal, was no longer being developed at Universal because Universal didn't want it. They had other plans, you see. They were going to make the Dark Universe with the Mummy. Who needed that Kong nonsense, right? Oh boy, are they kicking themselves now. But anyway, thanks to a legal loophole, Legendary brought Kong Skull Island over to Warner Brothers, and then Kong Skull Island was announced to be part of the same continuity as the American Godzilla movies, which meant the MonsterVerse was born, and it would be leading up to a rematch between these two cinematic icons. And once again, there was much rejoicing. People loved the idea. Finally, after decades, Godzilla and King Kong were finally going to get an official big screen rematch. And once that fervor died down and everybody had a chance to catch their breath and settle for a moment, that's when you started to hear people say, wait a minute, Godzilla's fighting Kong after he fights Ghidorah? How does that make sense? The main reason people started thinking this is because when you put Ghidorah next to Kong in terms of opponents for Godzilla, obviously, no matter what version you go with, King Ghidorah is going to be the more powerful opponent. Kong might be the most powerful thing on Skull Island, but there's nothing like Godzilla on Skull Island. And it's pretty much always been known that Kong never stands a chance against Godzilla without some major handicaps and advantages being piled on top of both of them. Back in 1962, the only way they could think of to even the playing field, even after scaling Kong up to the same size as Godzilla, was to basically give Kong a superpower and give Godzilla a specific weakness to that superpower, which he had not had before. And that was the only way they thought Kong could even stand a chance. This is why people were confused about Godzilla fighting Kong after he fights Ghidorah. From a marketing standpoint, sure, it makes sense because Godzilla and Kong are the cinematic icons. They've been in some of the most iconic movies of all time. They are considered important. They are considered pretty equal in terms of popularity. So it makes sense why that would be the title fight from that perspective, but internally, from a storytelling perspective, what sort of a challenge was Kong going to offer to Godzilla? That's the way it was phrased, by the way. What sort of challenge is Kong to Godzilla? Remember that. It's important. I think even members of Team Kong knew that the fight's outcome was probably a foregone conclusion. And if you look at any interview with Adam Wingard post the movie's release, you'll find that even he believed it was a foregone conclusion. Of course Godzilla was going to win. Godzilla's a living thermonuclear flamethrower. What is a big monkey gonna do against that? So that's why he framed the movie the way he did. And that is why I'm still surprised this question keeps getting asked by people. Remember the way it was phrased? What sort of a threat is Kong to Godzilla? Well, now that we've actually seen Godzilla vs. Kong, I would think it's obvious that that's the wrong question. Obviously, Kong is not a threat to Godzilla. The real question asked by the movie, certainly, is what sort of threat does Godzilla pose to Kong? And can Kong actually overpower Godzilla? After all, the movie is from Kong's perspective. He is put squarely in the realm of protagonist, with Godzilla in the realm of antagonist. Not villain. He did not turn evil the way a lot of people were suggesting, but he was definitely antagonistic towards Kong. And with Kong being our point of focus, that meant Kong was also cast in the role of the underdog because we knew he wasn't necessarily on the same power level. So we wanted to see how he could actually find a way to match Godzilla, if he even could. And could he actually stand a chance? You may notice that's a completely different question. It's a question of how is he going to beat Godzilla? What is he gonna do that would even give him an edge? And the way it plays out is a large part of why everyone says, even though Godzilla won the fight, Kong arguably won the film. But there's still a little more to it than that, because it doesn't quite address the question of whether or not it should have happened after Ghidorah's fight, which is what I'm going to get into next. I've done several videos at this point detailing the thematic layers of Godzilla vs. Kong. And yes, it does have thematic layers. It doesn't have a lot. It's not an especially deep movie, but there are layers there. It's not as shallow and surface level as a lot of people claim it is. One of those themes is about how, on a certain allegorical level, Godzilla vs. Kong is a story about man against God, with Kong in the role of man and Godzilla in the role of God. Godzilla is portrayed as this all-powerful, giant, unstoppable, unknowable force, and Kong is perhaps the most human he has ever been, without actually being human. He has a sense of humanity, he's able to speak, he has mannerisms that are familiar to anyone, really. So we have that established dynamic between them. But we have to actually believe that Godzilla fits the role of a god. And so, one of the best ways to establish that in a series like this is to have him beat the devil. That's what happened in Godzilla 2019. Godzilla King of the Monsters 2019, that is. That's where he fought King Ghidorah. Godzilla faced off against his most powerful opponent, a creature who could destroy the world, and Godzilla won. It was close, but he won. And after that, he's the top dog. This is how he becomes King of the Monsters. This is how he becomes the ruler of this modern world. So now, he's the one that it needs to be beaten, and Kong is coming in as the underdog. A character who certainly has had his victories, he has his own realm in which he is top dog, but he is taken way out of his element. And arguably, this theme would not have resonated as much if Godzilla had not faced King Ghidorah first. He had to do that in order to establish his role in Godzilla vs. Kong. Which is not to say that the whole thing is just a plot device, mind you, but it is part of the overall story. And then, of course, Mechagodzilla came in at the end to present an even greater threat, and historically, Mechagodzilla always hands Godzilla his butt before Godzilla stands even a chance of beating him. But even so, even without Mechagodzilla being there, we still have this dynamic, and that is why Ghidorah needed to be introduced first. If we've got two characters that we first meet in similar circumstances and are presented as kind of equal at the beginning, if we want to frame Kong as the underdog, Godzilla needs to be shown as the top dog. And thus, he fights his most powerful opponent before facing off against Kong. That puts him on a completely different level and gives Kong something to struggle against. And therefore, I don't think the MonsterVerse got it backwards at all. Now, as far as what sort of challenge this new Titan is going to be, and how he's going to be so powerful that he can give both Godzilla and Kong a run for their money simultaneously, I don't know. A lot of people are jumping to conclusions about a character they know nothing about in a movie they've never seen, but even they don't know. A lot of us are just thrown by the fact that this new opponent is yet another large primate. Even I'm a little thrown by that. But then again, it's just like a 30-second teaser. We don't have that much information. We don't know what this guy is capable of, or if he's alone. But in light of his reveal, people have been bringing up the Ghidorah argument again, so I just wanted to put this out there and hopefully provide a better perspective on things to get people thinking about this maybe a little more clearly. Hopefully I've laid it out in such a way that you can see why I think it makes sense for the Ghidorah fight to have come before Godzilla faced off against Kong. Because it wasn't really about Godzilla having a challenge, it was about Kong having a challenge. And we know that now. It's obvious if you see the movie. Anyway, like I said, just wanted to throw that out there for people to consider. Until such time as we meet again, this is the Omni Viewer signing off. Thank you all for watching. If you want to see us keep doing what we're doing, you might consider doing all the usual YouTube things, as well as hopping down to the description to find links to DeviantArt, Patreon, Twitter, and links for the different books in the Tales from the Omni Vault universe. Your support is naturally appreciated. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.